Hello, and welcome to episode 27 of season 6 of Dualistic Unity. I am starting this one off because why the fuck not? It's been a while since I did that, and I always enjoyed doing so. It's been a long time now that we've been doing the podcast. You know, it's funny, it doesn't always dawn on me, but it's very much a part of my life. And over the last 2.5 years, whatever that means, there's just been so many changes in how I view what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and the impact it has, and so on and so forth. And I just wanted to say to our listener, thank you for coming along on this ride and for informing the ride and sharing the ride and resonating with the ride. I appreciate everything that you are. I appreciate everything that you try to do. And I appreciate how hard sometimes you can make it on yourself and even how hard it is otherwise. I appreciate you. I just wanted you to know.
Yeah, it has been quite the ride and quite the journey. And even that there's anyone listening to this at this point, and quite a few people listening at this point, it's like, I forget that it's been 2.5 years of doing these episodes. And it kind of, as much as there's been shifts and changes and growth, like each and every time it's the same sort of thing, same sort of realization or recognition. It's just that there comes points where it's not just a conversation, it's like application and applying it in your life, and just jumping in to uncertainty, like being willing to let go of this idea that there is any guarantees of anything beyond where you're at, what you're doing, and being informed by that instead of trying to have this idea of like how things are going to go or where things are going to lead. And so in regards to audience and whatnot, I get the that sense of not knowing and being willing to just like march on through it and like just admit that there's no guarantees, like there's no certainty whatsoever, and be like, yeah, but I got this. Yeah, but I can do this. Yeah, I don't know what's going to be faced, but I'll figure it out when I get there. And that practice is something that personally I've done, a number of times, but like, yeah, there's the practice of it, and you realize that, oh, it isn't about changing the world at all. It's not about changing someone else's opinion or perspective or this idea that someone else should be doing anything differently. It's letting go of that, but also being willing to let yourself be just what you are. Like let yourself go in the sense of not keeping such a close watch and monitor, because that's kind of reflective in just the watch and monitor of how you see the world, instead of actually just being here, like prior. And it's, again, it's not, it's just prioritizing here. It's not like prioritizing me or them or this or that. It's just taking a good full look at what's actually going on and not looking away, because thinking about anything is just kind of looking away. It's like pulling the covers on top of you in bed when you don't want to get out of bed, or someone's talking to you and you're just like, no, I'm not here. And you pull the covers over instead of just being like, all right, well, jump out. And then you jump out and it's like, oh, all right, it was just that. Yeah, just that jump. Being willing to be like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's next. I don't know what's to come. And that's okay. And you find out as you go, because you're it happening next, when you're willing to be. And regardless of whether you're willing or not, you're it regardless. So whatever you're invested in is kind of what you're reflecting as you continue through whatever it is you're doing.
It's interesting. There really is a very big difference between the story that we want to tell ourselves and the experience we're actually having. The experience that we're actually having is one that goes from moment to moment and is very much dependent on how much awareness we put into that experience. But the story we tell ourselves actually takes us away from the experience. And that's a hell of a trade, because the awareness that we can experience here and now doesn't have any sense of certainty or value or anything else, because it's involved with what it's doing. So there's no payoff in that. There's no sense of security. There's no sense of where am I going and what does it mean about me, right? But you'll know the tree by the fruit it bears. The more attention you're paying into your life, the more attention you're paying into the moment, the more things start to change for you. And it's because you are just taking information in. If it's not about the story, then it's information. And so it's going to help you process things in a different way. Whereas if you were to react to any of that information and make it about your story, you would start blocking it out. And that's really it. How much is it personal? How much is it about you? And the rest of the time, it's not about you at all. It's about everything. And you're just a point in everything doing its thing. We really do have this clarity that we can live in, but it's not about not thinking about the story. It's about recognizing that the more aware you become, the more you recognize that there are numerous different stories all the time that are happening. So many, in fact, that you can't stop. This is the world of imagination and creation, right? This is where you have authors and painters and people who do visual effects and movie directors and stuff like that. Like that. Just there's so many different perceptions of the world. There's so many different stories of what could be happening, right? You could take one scene of somebody walking across a room, maybe making different facial expressions as they go, and ask a dozen different people what happened there. And they'd have a dozen different answers. They'd have a dozen different perceptions of what happened there, right? Well, the same is true for the person walking across the room. They could experience a dozen different things as they're going across the room, right? So none of them are the truth, but all of them have some lesson. All of them have some degree of insight in them if you want to be informed by it. Because what happens when you have a perception that, let's just say, you lack value? You may go through it and struggle with it and then eventually let it go, recognizing it's just a perception. But more importantly, you've just experienced something that somebody else is going through. Maybe you just experienced a little bit of it, but you experienced it and it was real experience. And all of a sudden there's a degree of empathy there. There's a connection that's immediately there. But it had nothing to do with the story being true. It had everything to do with this common affliction that we have and thinking that any of the stories are true. That we get so carried away with them. And on that, we can relate to one another. And that's kind of what I was saying earlier about dualistic unity. I'm learning a lot more about what we're doing here. I'm learning a lot more about what it is I'm really talking about, and why I'm talking about it. And it's really interesting because I'll tell you, you were talking earlier about just kind of leaping into it and jumping into uncertainty. I don't even think about it anymore. Like, to me, that's just what it is. Like, uncertainty is just what is. I've leapt so much that at the moment, everything in my life is on faith. Everything. But what I find in that experience is that I'm deeply involved with it. I'm deeply involved with my life because I'm not thinking about too much of the future and too much of the past and what it means about me and what I want out of it and where's it all going and how would I like to be perceived, and none of that. I'm just in it. And that's what we're talking about here. Just being in it. Like listening to this podcast is a perfect example. I understand I've been rambling for a few minutes, but just humor me. Listening to this podcast. You could be listening to this podcast trying to get something out of it. Looking for an insight, looking for some way to feel like you're doing okay. But I'm never going to tell you that. And I'm hoping I never, give you an insight to like, take this with you, note it down. There's nothing wrong. Like the fiction in your head, the drama in your head, the story that's in your head, that's a different story. That's something we can talk about, not because it's a problem, but because we're so fucking convinced it is. That's all. We're just really used to taking our shit seriously, and so we make it serious. And so here we are talking about how to lighten it up. Here we are talking about seeing through it. Here we are talking about the stress response to that stuff and how it solidifies it. Like, that's really all we're talking about, is this collective delusion that we fall into for a sense of comfort that causes our pain. So I like the fact that this conversation isn't really about the conversation. It's no, well, I mean, it kind of is, in the fact that we're just hanging out here spending time. This is why I love the fact that this episode is being recorded live. Hi, everyone. Glad that you could make it. We're going to get to your comments in just a second. I'm going to pass it over to Andrew, and then I noticed that we have a few questions, and I'm looking forward to answering them. But nonetheless, I appreciate every one of you for being here. And if you're not here while we're doing this live, you kind of still are.
Amen. Yeah, that sense of, because, if you're willing to just be uncertain, again, like all these things start coming to mind. It's like, oh, well, there's this. And it's not to say they're not correct, but like this fundamental story, this fundamental story narrative, and then stories that branch off of that. And I guess, I mean, that's kind of a way you could look at it or talk about it or whatever. But then it turns into this thing that's like a whole thing instead of it just being like just not doing. It's kind of just like not doing what you want or think is best based on something as much. Because if you think about that, like doing what you want to do all the time, and everyone's thinking like that all around, that's going to create, with like a tunnel vision towards it all the time, that's going to create a lot of chaos, like a lot of tumultuous, like a reality that's pretty fucking gnarly. If everyone's just doing what they want individually without so much sensitivity. And so it's not necessarily even like a black and, again, it's not black and white. It's a sensitivity thing, I guess. And it's like a spectrum of willing to take in, like, it's just willing to take in more considerations, really. And then doing things based on that. Like, instead of, it's just how narrow is the perspective that you're making choices from, that you're choosing from, and like how immediate is it? Because it's like the perspective of, instant gratification versus delayed gratification. But that's like, oh, I'll delay my gratification for me and my gratification, so I'm not going to do this now, going to do it later. And that's a component of it. And it's like something you can look at, but it's still for me, instead of it just being like, oh, there's a trade as I continue to try to satisfy that or do it, under the server, or delay the gratification or anything. And there's still the continued deliberation, but like being willing to not be so sure or not take thoughts as truth and just keep going. It feels like a very different sort of thing. And so I've wondered if, like, thinking about something, just I'm gonna think about that for a little more, instead of it's just an alternative, but it's a tool. Like, it is very much a tool. Like, you can do it for a bit. It's just that it's like the servant master thing. Like, it really is, if it's taken and like followed purposefully. But there's also like, yeah, like some underlying sort of perspective that's there. That's, a lot of the conversation that we've had, especially early on in the podcast, the underlying perspective that it's like, yeah, the you that you have in your head, like the you that you're thinking about isn't. And there's almost like things that stem from that. like whether you're assuming it is or it isn't. And there is kind of like a black and a white thing that then plays out for every decision, like that informs. Like there's almost like a root informative thing, like, no, I'm what I think I am, and so therefore this, versus no, I'm not, and therefore this. And I think, yeah, in the last couple months, I kind of went down. I like we were talking this morning on the live stream, just like you start telling yourself a story, and you can just like it'll start playing out just as a means of not continuing to pay attention to where you're at.
Yeah, and it's addictive.
Yeah.
Because again, like we don't have faith in ourselves at the end of the day. And what I mean by that is quite simply what you just said. Seems simple enough. Shit, the more self-absorbed I am, the less I'm actually getting good at anything I'm doing. Because a good portion of what I'm doing is actually just me judging myself. So my attention is never really on what I'm doing, which makes it impossible for me to get anywhere in what I'm doing with any degree of efficacy in a short period of time. It's all going to take forever. It's going to seem very fucking confusing. It's going to be very frustrating because most of it's about me and what it means about me. Isn't that interesting? We just take ourselves out of the equation and suddenly we're learning a lot more. We're learning a lot more. We're learning a lot faster. But it requires us to actually let go of what it means about us. That's the tricky part. And this is the funniest thing, is the more you do it, the more you have to make this choice. Are you enjoying the ride? Would you like to continue on? Let go. Like, and that's it. You don't have to. You can hold on to yourself. And that's why in Hawkins' chart, he talks about 2 points in that chart where it's difficult to make the leap. The first one is courage, right? Where it's like, fuck it, I don't need the carrot or the stick. I'm just continuing on without a reward. I don't fucking need it. Life is just continuing on. And so there's a profound attitude shift there. But you see, right there, all of a sudden now you're not thinking about yourself as much because it's not about the reward or the stick, right? It's not about, oh God, I'm not going to get what I deserve, or oh, I'm going to get what I deserve. It's not about that, or it's not even about you. It's just about carrying on and shutting the fuck up. That's all it's about. Okay, so that's a really hard leap when you're used to just dwelling in thought, because all of your thought is about that shit. All of the thought that's about the fiction of you is underneath that line, because it takes courage to leave you behind. But when you make that leap, suddenly you have so much more energy, you have so much more clarity. And so you start getting really good at things. All of a sudden you start excelling in your work. You start seeing more opportunities. You start taking on hobbies because you've got so much more fucking time because you're not wallowing or crying in the fetal position, right? And so with that suddenly comes not confidence, because again, it's not about the carrot and the stick, but it really does start to get tempting to start thinking about yourself as being an effective, efficient, intelligent person. It really does become very tempting to start thinking of it in terms of you're intelligent. And that's why the next line that's so hard to pass is reason. That part where it's about you being intelligent instead of you being intelligence, which is really another line in the sand where you leave the fiction of you behind even more. You know, that's the fiction of you being in control at all, of you being separate from any of this, of what you mean as you being the whole. You know, and that's a tricky one, but it's always just about letting go. And it's funny because it's after reason in Hawkins' chart where you find love, and acceptance and joy is right after that. And it's because there's no weight. There's no weight on you being the intelligent one. There's no weight on you being in control and saving anyone. But again, with that lack of weight comes a lack of importance that can be threatened. That's the freedom. You don't get to feel important, but you don't fucking need to. And there's equality. That's where you start seeing everybody as you. That's where you start seeing everybody as the same in different fucking stories. You know, it's where you stop making the assumption that if you were in somebody else's position, you would do it differently and better. That's because that all comes from below that line of courage. That all comes from you needing to self-validate and you needing to think that you know what to do, that you're in control, that you know what's right. All of that That whole lack of empathy comes with that fucking fiction of you every time. But that's it. That's the choice. Do you want to keep going? Do you want to enjoy the ride? Do you want to continue to see how much you can change, what your potential truly is? Then you have to be willing to stop making it about you. Which means you get all of that and none of the reward that you want so badly that keeps you from having it.
Ain't that a bitch? But at the same time, it's like, okay, so you get like the experience, like, is that not enough? And like, so if there is some sort of like, oh, but I want to feel good about myself, or I want, yeah, and it comes in a lot of different ways, but it's like, oh, I want, and like, why do you need the additional sort of thing? It's like, is that not enough? And you're jumping into uncertainty anyway, so like, you can actually be feeling super okay about things, and someone can, judge as arrogant, for example, or something. Even if you're not thinking about yourself at all and you're just like talking like without so much hesitation about something that it seems obvious but maybe isn't, and you start talking more, and yeah, like, admittedly there's been uh like, yeah, it's like there's trades to everything. Like, every fucking, from every moment to every life, and you can't do everything. You can't do it all. You can only do what you're doing. But yeah, you wonder, because yeah, the last couple months has very much been like a visible display of, at least in my experience, of like, me fucking me me.
And that's
Oh,
it. It's just visible to you because you're looking for it. Right? That's the point. Like I go shit. I go through shit all the time. And I used to assume that everybody knew.
God, it's
But then I realized they're all assuming the same shit. So they're so busy looking at themselves that they're not looking at me. And even if they think they're looking at me, it's usually through the filter of themselves.
ah, fuck, man. That was a good quick check right there, because it's like, as soon as you start assuming that you know what's going on with you, it's like everyone else has to see. It's like, nah, fucking stop that shit. Because because I remember when I was, and it's really, really interesting. Like, it just intrigue. I'm way more intrigued about, my life and like looking back at it than like, oh, ah, ah, like all these sort of judgmental things about different points, different things, different things. Now it's just like curiosity, because I can see shifts even just in, when I was younger. Like, one of the first initial things, and talked about it early in content, that like shifted for me was like, no one's thinking about me nearly as much as I think they are. Like that. I think I read it in, because of course, like, I'm realizing now too how many of my words were like from something learned, taught, whatever. But yeah, I get it translated through, but it was from Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. And like, just that right there, it clicked in a way, and I was like, oh fuck. And that, again, not making about yourself, realizing that it's not about you. Like, no one is seeing what you see, period. Like, we're trying to talk about, like, we talk about things and say things, but like, really, in your perspective, your assumptions about yourself, your assumptions about people, like, you're alone. You're very much alone in that. And so it makes sense why there's sort of like, I don't know, like, a big fear people have is of being lonely. Like, they want to be around something. Like, I notice myself if I'm like, you know, in my apartment by myself. I recognize there's like a, you know, an aversion to being alone. Like, why? Why is because I'm because it's this I don't know, like assumption that it could be anything, all sorts of stuff. It's just being left with yourself and all the stuff, and then it's like, yeah, because it's all you can't distract at that point. You're absolutely left with yourself. And like if you are making it about you, then there's gonna be it's like you can't you can't escape reality. You can just like cloud it out as best you can and fog it up, but like suffer a lot yourself for that. You can just kind of muddle shit up. It's like, whoa, things are looking kind of clear. I'm gonna fuzzy that up. It's like, oh, now I'm kind of like stumbling around and I have like fucking blurry vision because I just there are things that you think mean something about you that don't, and then when it doesn't, and the experience of that, it's like, why do you need any sort of reward? But it's like everything's always a trade. Everything's always a trade. But I'm happy to get into some of the questions also, unless you
Might
want to
as well,
keep
right?
going.
I mean,
You want to
we're
continue?
definitely going to keep going, but this all ties together. I mean, what are we always talking about? We're just talking about awareness as a spectrum, as opposed to awareness as a concept, which is a very big difference, right? So, I'm curious to know your thoughts on prayer, not to God, but to others in our collective awareness. If someone is sick, for example, if tens of thousands of people concentrate their thoughts on healing them, can they contribute to healing? And I don't think it's a crazy thought if we are truly divisions of one. Now, what's interesting there is there's a lot of things that are interesting there. I'll start off by saying that first off. I think that you're on to something. I don't necessarily think it's the way that you would like it to be. And what I mean is specifically the need for control or even knowing what healing is, as well as the idea of being divisions of one rather than the whole of the one in yourself, which is all very disempowering. And it changes how you meditate. It changes the level of awareness that you bring to each and every moment. And we actually have a manifestation series that we did. Hold up. There it is. You can find it on the website dualisticunity.com. We were talking about manifestation and the fact that so often the manifestation crowd, the audience, and the conversation kind of swings towards manifesting something in particular, whereas there is something that is happening constantly. And it's not as limited as just, I'd like a red bike or I'd like a new car or something like that. There's more of an impact on everything that's happening all the time from you, very much dependent on the spectrum of awareness that we were talking about earlier. So to tie into that, and this is why I brought up the manifestation series, there was actually a group meditation in the late 80s, early 90s. I want to say it's in Washington. You can actually find this. They had thousands of people over a course of like 5 days come and meditate in the city just for the point of, and again, meditation is something that not everybody understands and not everybody does the right way. It is also a spectrum in terms of understanding and depth, right? But nonetheless, over the course of that meditation, the crime rate in Washington dropped by like 80%. And before they had done that meditation, the chief of police had actually said there was no way it would drop by that much unless there was a snowstorm or a blizzard. There was none. The weather was fine. So that just goes to show you there is a measurable impact. But on the other hand, Dualistic Unity, for example, is involved with the Global Consciousness Project. The Global Consciousness Project has actually been measuring the impact of awareness and consciousness on a global and individual level for the last fucking 30 years using various different techniques, including random number generators and stuff like that. There was a measurable impact of 9/11, which is fucking mind-blowing in itself. But they also have noticed that the randomness of numbers, for example, in a group of meditators will change, but that depending on the group, that may not be true. So what's the variation there? What is the difference? And I would argue that it's how much they're meditating for something, how much they're meditating for that sense of identity, how much it's meditating as a practice of egotism, as opposed to actually just witnessing yourself as existence, which is an entirely different meditation. It's the meditation that Alan Watts was talking about. And in that, I'm saying that there is more potential, that we are informed by that clarity and that potential. And I would say that if there's any capacity for healing, it's in that.
Yeah, and just kind of to go on that last thing you said, like it really it kind of brings into at least clarity for me that it's not about like what you're doing even. Like there are things that you tend to gravitate towards if you are thinking about yourself versus not, but it's not the thing that you're doing that's gonna cause it. And so there's like sort of a natural expression of that, because like if you are meditating, like because I've and I called it meditation more so when I was doing it for a reason. Like I want to solve myself, like chill these out. And it was very much about me versus now it's kind of the thought of like just sitting down and yeah, and just watching stuff that isn't at all about me at all. And so that intention, I don't know. So I think the focus though on a specific thing, yeah, I wonder like how much sway and oh man, now I'm like fucking thinking about myself a bit. I'm not gonna lie. I'm right here just like running through and I'm like, oh boy, am I
There's your
getting
answer,
like
though. Like, how much sway does thinking about ourselves really have over the impact that we have on anything? You just experienced it in real fucking time.
yeah, there
But
we
that's
go.
how much it is. It's a hair trigger, right? This is why it always feels like you're threading a needle with faith,
Ooh,
right? Because it's not about you. It can't be about you because that's not faith. Right. So you're always just, slicing it ever finer, but it gets easier and easier to do so. So that said, we have people here in the audience. Somebody was asking if they can ask questions. Of course, you can ask questions if you would like to. I recognize that this person has followed me from Instagram, where I was having a conversation about Jesus and the Bible and so on and so forth. And again, like I want to mention this because this ties into what we're talking about to a very large degree. Um, Reading something like the Bible from a certain mentality, it just looks like, an easy way out. Like it just looks like, oh sweet, somebody's done all the thinking for me and now I know which path to follow. And better, they've given me not just a reward system but a punishment system, and they've given me a way to feel better than other people who aren't following this path, right? And so there's a whole mentality there that really goes back to like stage 3 and 4 of ego development, where somebody is still looking for that sense of security, where somebody is still looking for that sense of what is the right path as deemed by all of their peers. So that way they have that sense of security and that sense that they are going to be accepted and not ostracized. And there's a great deal that goes into the promise that goes with something like religion or the Bible. And so I understand that often people who want to talk about the Bible want to talk about the Bible. See, they want to talk about the Bible. They don't want to talk about why they need to believe in the Bible, why they don't question the Bible, why they, oversimplify things as a course of dealing with the cognitive dissonance that would go with a more nuanced conversation. This is kind of what I was doing with the whole good and evil thing. Somebody's like, okay, so I'm not sure. Are you saying that it's all gray area? Or that there's no good and evil? And my response was, that's a great question, because that's a great question. The problem is that they want me to answer that question instead of living with that question, and actually being informed by that question every fucking time they want to settle on some superficial assumption that validates their sense of being good. That's the point. It's not to so quickly settle on something that feels so good, when in fact that's the only reason you want to settle on it. It's to remain in that sense of uncertainty. It's to actually allow your intelligence as, fucking product of the universe or God or whatever you want to say, to actually function, in real time. But that's the difference. They want to argue theology. They want to argue that, well, the God I believe in is the real God. And it's laughable because it's like a child telling you why Santa's real. And ultimately, they're saying Santa's real because they want him to be. Now, that's not to say there's no God. Because again, the book was about an experience, right? By numerous different people. I fucking love that book. Don't get me wrong. Like when you really take the threats and the promises out of it, it's a damn good read. It's full of great symbolism. That's fine. But it's also something that's been twisted by politics. It's also something that's been, used numerous times over hundreds of years in different ways by different governments for different reasons. So instead of quibbling over the words which have been changed, instead of quibbling over, the stories which were pieced together anyway, we need to look deeper. We need to look at the experience we're actually having in and as existence. We need to be self-honest about what we're clinging to. Otherwise, we can never understand what anybody was talking about when they were talking about faith. Because all we'll do is we'll actually translate it according to our image of ourselves. If I think I am what I think I am, then I am something very small and very insignificant compared to the giant universe of chaos around me. And if I am small and insignificant, it necessitates a higher and more powerful consciousness.
As opposed to not thinking about it. And like, I mean, that's what we're doing here is talking about that sort of thing. But there's like obvious, and again, obviously real application to it. But, and I say, but it's like, it can feel like this thing, I guess. Yeah. Like when you are honest with yourself, it's just a continued process of that. And like, continuing to do it. And yeah, it's like the let go or be dragged kind of thing. And there are certain things that it's like, because you, so many things early on in the podcast, it was like, oh, even that. Oh, even that. Oh, even that. It's like, yeah, because, yeah, again, it's like things can feel, they're as real as you make them, but it can feel like it can become a sort of thing that, yeah, gets in the way, like focuses or certain wonders or concerns or ideas just start, popping up. The more that, I don't know, I don't even know, the more you let go of in yourself, it's like, but it's not something that you're doing necessarily. It's just continuing to pay attention and like not be sure of where it's going to go or how it's going to go, and not jumping to any conclusion immediately or trying to be sure of how it's going. It's like right now as I'm talking, like how is this, like straight up in real time, like how am I doing right now? Not something that should be, not a way that right way of expressing this, right way to answer the question, oh, where is it, and like like just running through all of that as if there's a spot where it's like, oh, that thing to do, instead of just an ongoing process, like going up and down through things and just continuing to, I don't know, not take it quite, or the assumptions quite so seriously. But yeah, there is the application, which happens here, it happens here all the time.
But that's the important part. And that's why it's so important to, and I've said this before, in Wing Chun Kung Fu, we have an expression, don't chase hands. And it's because we practice so close to one another that you should be able to just reach out and hit that person in the chest. You're just practicing. You're not being violent about it. But what I'm saying is that the ultimate goal is to be able to tag them on the chest. But because you're always interacting with their hands, sometimes you'll actually get into the habit of chasing those hands, and the chest is wide open while your hands are off to the right doing something useless. And that's kind of the point, is that we want to argue about, the Bible. We want to argue about Jesus and the story, whether he was resurrected. We want to get it onto all that shit. And we can't have that conversation with any degree of seriousness if we're not talking about our own need to believe in things because we're afraid of uncertainty. We can't have this conversation if we're not actually willing to make it about our existence, because that's what Jesus was talking about. That's what all of these people were talking about, their existence, something that was very intimate to them, not something that was just conceptual, something that was very intimate to them. It doesn't matter if it was Jesus or Buddha, whichever religion you want to look to, it all started with one or maybe a few people who were looking at it from their own point of view. And this is something that we kind of miss or don't want to look at as a common denominator. Jesus fucked off for 18 years. And when he came back, he threatened pretty much all of Judaism because he questioned everything that he had known very well by the age of 12. In those 18 years, he wasn't following someone else. He was trying to figure out his own path. That's why he came back with such a radically different message. Buddha actually says, put no head above your own. And yet people follow the quote unquote teachings of the Buddha, trying to achieve what he's communicating. You have to do this alone, because that in itself is an act of faith. It has to be your path. It has to be. We don't want it to be, but that is the common denominator behind all of these things. All of these people, they had the urge, they had the nerve and the courage to take it upon themselves to wrestle with their own existence. In the case of Jesus, wrestled with his own fucking demons, quite literally out in the desert, talking to his own fucking doubts and shit. Make yourself self-important. He's like, no, I don't really need to do that. Deem yourself as powerful. Yeah, I don't really need to do that either. That's really all it is. I don't need to think about myself. I can keep moving forward. And it's as ridiculous as if a cell in my body were to suddenly go, no, I know better, and just start rebelling against my body, because it knows better. Don't you know? Up until that moment, it was just my body in motion. It was literally an extension of my intelligence. Why do we have any idea that we're different? Why do we have any idea that we are different, other than the fact that we have this perspective of individuality, which is exacerbated by our need for control?
Yeah, very much so. When you put the cell in a body, fucking analogy back, it's like drop in a river, and it's like all the drops are like fucking going crazy, like all over the place. And the craziest thing you can do in that is not keep going crazy, trying to like grasp for control, grasp for certainty, grasp for something that's going to guarantee something in the future, like at all. Because as soon as there's thoughts about it, or like anything could play out, what are you doing right now? Where's your attention right now? Like this is it. This is what you got. And like how you're doing right now is also in that realm of, you don't know. You can assume, you can make assumptions for sure, but yeah, in that, like, you can't look around, you can't look to anyone else, you can't even like, I mean, you can, I don't know, explain. Yeah, it's like, it's not like you can explain. It's just like doing your thing, living your life. Like it's not that deep necessarily, but it's what's informing that. And again, it's like, all the, I don't know. I go back and forth, and now I'm like fucking judging myself for talking about like saying deep. I'm like, what the hell? And sometimes like I'll fucking jump, and now I'm like, fuck it, whatever. I'm already like feeling all this stuff inside and just talk my internal shit sometimes. And it's like, yeah, I feel like that could get annoying as I'm doing it again. But you keep going through, and like, who's to say that's not just appropriate to what's going on? But yeah, it's like it really is just doing it alone, and it's like, yeah, it's like it's done to you, or you choose to do it, to go it alone. And yeah,
Dude, if your relationship with existence isn't a personal one, there's a fucking problem. Like that's very much the point. So this goes to the next question from the comment section. And again, I want a voice. I appreciate you being here, commenter. This is a great conversation. It kind of all ties into what we're talking about. Sir, you don't have to be so formal. Do you think all Christians have this clinging that you speak of? Because that wasn't my conviction or hope of my faith. You've answered your own question just in your need to identify as Christian. Why do you need to identify as Christian? Why do you need to hold on to this idea of yourself other than for the comfort that it gives you, that you are on the right path and what it means about you and the community that you're a part of and all of that control, all of that superficial concept that's not actually the truth? When in fact, without that small thing, without that label, you would be closer to reality. You would be closer to everyone, because it's the labels that divide us. It's the ideas that divide us. That's why I've said before, and I think I said it in Instagram recently, the only true binding religion is none. It's the one thing we all share by default: uncertainty and existence. And that's the point, is your relationship with existence, not your relationship with your idea, because that's a very different thing. And this is, again, where religion kind of leads us astray. Your idea of God is not God. Right? That's the point, is that your idea of air is not air. Your idea of your brother, your sister, your friend, your wife is not your brother, your sister, your friend, or your wife. Your idea of a tree is not the fucking tree. So it is obvious that your idea of God, your idea of Jesus, is not the reality of those things. That's not to say they don't exist. That's not to say that God isn't real. It's just not what you think it is. And the danger there is to make it into something. And that's the warning about false idols. And that's the point. That's why Yahweh means ineffable, undefinable. And yet we do nothing but have an idea of it. And then we make it into this father figure that's also very secure and makes us very certain. Right? We have a response, and I love this, and I'm going to answer it quickly before I pass it over to. Of course, but we can say the same for your view. No, where is this false certainty in my view? In my view, we are here. That's it. That's all, and that is connection to what is. That's connection to each other. That is why it is ridiculous that we judge one another. In the same way, it would be ridiculous for cells in my body to judge one another. But again, we get caught up in our idea of ourselves, and that causes a great deal of our pain, which was my point about the whole serpent and good and evil thing, as well as, the idea of being cast from the garden. It's also the reason that Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself. Love God, and like that, love your neighbor as yourself. That doesn't mean loving them as the idea of you, because obviously that doesn't work. So that means you have to get rid of the idea of you. And what you find is that you are loving yourself. In the same way that you are loving yourself enough to have faith and let yourself actually be what you are without those training wheels, you are loving everyone else. In the same way you have faith in yourself, you can now have faith in others, rather than constantly trying to manipulate your way into a sense of control or righteousness.
Yeah, because and even philosophical conversations will start talking about here, like being here and what that means, everything that goes with that. And it's like can be fun to discuss, but there can be I guess it's that part of that spectrum where it's like, how well can you talk about here? How well can you do something here? And again, that's another judgment, and it's a sense of it gives that feeling of a good feeling. And that's so much of a driver, is just good things are things that make me feel good, and bad things are things that make me feel bad. And that's kind of as simplistic as we've made a lot of things. Like, why is that? Why is that bad? Exactly. It's like, and again, maybe it doesn't apply to everything, but it certainly has that sense, because beyond that, it's like, what is good or bad? What is the right or the wrong thing to do? If it's not about how you feel anymore, then it's just what it is. And there's like a difference in decisions and applications and ways of living life when that doesn't have to be like the bottleneck to every decision or everything that you do or assume. We're getting some more comments.
Oh, I was reading it. I was going to let you finish your point before getting to
Okay.
them.
Yeah. Yeah. Go for it.
Well, it's this. You're just assuming falsely. Religion has to stray someone when it could have the same impact. No, what I'm saying is quite clearly, and I'm saying this, and I just want you to think about it without the burden of trying to defend yourself. Just listen carefully, okay? If you're relying on what somebody else is telling you, you're relying on your assumptions about what they're telling you. And so now you're going through an extra layer before you can actually get to a relationship with reality. Do you want a relationship with your religion, or do you want a relationship with God? And what I'm saying is that religion is the avoidance of God, which is why religion is always based on someone who experienced God, and then everyone after that followed them without being able to do the same. And you can argue, well, some of the apostles, that was a long fucking time ago. Any new Christians? Anything like that? You can say I'm falsely accusing or falsely assuming about religion, but I would say that's cognitive dissonance. See, what I'm saying is that in clinging to this idea of yourself, to this structure, to these assumptions about Jesus, and justifying all of the shit that goes with the making of the Bible, and I know from your comments, you're like, yeah, critical thinking is really important. Great, great. So why cling to it? Outside of lack of faith in the reality of God. Remember, Jesus didn't have a New Testament, and he straight up questioned everything about the religion he was raised with. Why aren't you doing the same? You don't think that's the common denominator? Or is it just that it's too uncomfortable? Is it just that you would actually have to face what it means to do that? To walk alone, to make it your own path, to have your own experience of existence, to try and communicate that despite people judging you, despite people telling you you're crazy, despite people getting angry that you're threatening their beliefs. Does that sound like someone? Does it sound like someone that you've been looking up to? Why not fucking do it? Why sit in the bleachers? Why take the safe route? Why travel that wide path that's held onto by so many when you could quite easily just follow the narrow path that is your own?
And that's the choice right there. And it's a it's a choice that cascades into all different things without any guarantee whatsoever. But it is, it's a choice and a thought, and like, not a thought, but it's an opportunity. And I'm when it comes to that sense of like looking for someone, like it's letting go of the need to be validated in any way, like any decision, any way of interacting, anything that you do, needing any additional, like, this is good, right? This is okay, right? And it's like as basic as that. Like, it seems very real when you put it like that. Like, you're getting ready to go to a dinner, like in college, and you kind of get a sense, or at least this is for me, and you're like, what's everyone wearing today? And you're like checking in. It's like, don't look around, show up with whatever you're showing up with. And if it's totally different, like, oh, whatever. And like, but the alternative is trying to mitigate all of the potential judgment that would only come from being different, like having a differing perspective. That's all it is. It's only different. If there was another night where it's like you happen to wear the same stuff, it's like there wouldn't be any question whatsoever. If you happen to do the same sort of things, live the same sort of way, but as long as you're doing your own thing and like cool with it, it immediately brings into question like like people almost inevitably are going to have a response to it if you're interacting. And again, like that's just more assumptions. Like people are going to have some response, but despite, potential judgment or thoughts about whatever you're doing or whichever way you're living, like, can you, like, is that worth the trade of being yourself? Like, of not looking to anyone else doing what you're doing. So, especially, you know, in a world where there seems to be a sense of normal or the right way. It's just like everyone has their familiar sort of way or the way they were brought up, or the way like the community that they grew up in. And there is a way, like, we really are just expressions of experience. Like, you see two people who grew up in a similar environment and there's similar focuses, there's similar things that are valued, there's similar stuff. And so, like, making any sort of jump from that, which could be, leaving a religion, it could be doing anything, like, any, say, religion, for example, like anyone who's in it, as you just keep talking about it or recognize, or reasons, you even just explain some reasons that you left the religion, like, you get demonized immediately. Like, I had someone in comments this morning say that my words were coming from a demon as opposed to God. And I was like, damn, I'm just like trying to have a conversation here. And you're like going to this extreme level of judgment that they're demonic, but it's just things that make them comfortable versus less comfortable. And if you're just being honest with yourself, that's all it is. It's not about anyone else. It's just being honest about where your stuff is, talking about that and talking openly, and just like talking from the inside out instead of holding it back, and just doing things, and just without a second thought is like the hesitation. It's like, well, but this, huh, and that can, manifest in a lifetime or in a moment no differently.
Exactly. And that's what we're learning, right? We have a
I
few
see
more
more
questions. Oh,
comments, but
yeah.
I'm doubting
This
comment.
is a follow up to the conversation we've been having up until this point, and then somebody else asked a question. In your opinion, can someone believe in the deity of Jesus and authenticity of the Gospels and have the correct approach, uncorrupted by the false teachers you speak of? There's so much bias in that question in itself. No, no, I don't. And it's just because there's so much disconnect that you've invested in yourself that creates this disconnect that you have with the human being that was Jesus. And that's the whole point. I encourage you check out the Gospel of Thomas if you can. It's a hell of a good read. But I really think it really just comes down to the second part of your question was, uncorrupted by false teachers. Okay. Is anything not God? It's just a question. And this is going to tie into the next question that somebody else asked. Okay. So that means, and more importantly, is it just Jesus and the Bible that are supposed to be the voice of God? Because even if that were the case, let's just assume that's the case. Okay. That the Bible is the actual word of God. Okay. You and I read that Bible differently. Obviously. Obviously. Because while you might say, well, you don't really know the Bible, I was raised Roman Catholic. I've read the Bible cover to cover numerous times. I devoted the first 15 years of my life to a firm fucking belief in Jesus as a way of dealing with all of the shit in my life, despite how much my life was hard. So, yeah, I believed. I had considered seminary. I was going to be a priest. I was going to do the whole thing. And what I'm saying to you is, after a lifetime of looking at it, not as, oh, fuck, there's no value in that book whatsoever, but actually giving it a certain degree of credibility in conjunction with a path of growing self-awareness and self-honesty about why I wanted that book to answer so much for me. I have found there's lessons in it for sure, but there's lessons everywhere because it's you learning them. It's you learning them from yourself, and it comes down to your willingness to question yourself. It comes down to your willingness to question your assumptions and question your false certainties and question your beliefs and question all of these things you cling to, because that is faith in yourself and God, if you want to look at it that way. But they're the same thing, because as you question that idea of yourself enough, you start to recognize that that's the only thing that's making you feel divided from God. The idea of yourself, the one that you judge in the same way that you're judging everyone else. Judge not lest ye be judged. That actually means the same thing. Like if you're judging, you're validating judgment, which means you're going to fear everybody else's judgment, even though they're just yours. They're just yours. So that's my answer to that. Can you hold on to the idea of Jesus? Can you follow a religion? Can you identify as a Christian and still connect to God? No. Nope. Nope. Unless you're willing to let it go. In the same way that a rich man has about as much chance as getting into heaven as Campbell has going through that very tiny gate outside Jerusalem. Right? Not very likely. Might happen. You'd have to let go of a lot of shit, though. And in this case, it's letting go of religion itself. Can you do that? Can you? Do you have the faith to stand on your own before God? The reality, not the belief. Do you have the faith in yourself? Or are you too busy judging yourself, trying to do the right thing because you think you're not enough? Because that's all on you. And eventually you'll have to let that go, but it means you'll have to be honest that it's you. It's you doing it. It's your judgment. You're the one holding God at arm's length because you don't want it to be you. That would require you to be empathetic. It would require you to live here in the present, allowing yourself to process things as they come. It would require you to stop having to feel better than everybody else. You'd have to let go of the path entirely and settle for existence. And isn't that exactly what this is about? So that said, we have another question, but I'll pass it over to Andrew first.
Yeah. My response, I'm enjoying more back and forth discussions just about religion, and it's like, about religion. It's like the shift for me has been, as I've been more self-honest, like I don't focus on the religion as much as like where that's coming from, and like the need that's just being fulfilled by religion to look somewhere else. And it's kind of like there's like a sort of basicness to not looking somewhere else. And so religion is just a way that someone can look somewhere else to feel like they're doing the right thing, living the right way. And it's like we're all just looking for the right way to live. And so if there isn't so much, it can almost feel intense, just because it's like you're like each and every moment your reality, like expressing whatever's going on. And so knowing the right way to live is something that's like a continuous, it's not right. It's just the way that life is happening is a continuous thing. And so it can feel, I don't know, frightening. Again, it's not that. I'm like coming up with stories about just being here because like part of me is like, I don't know, that whole thing. It's like there's a lot to let go of, and it's just the focus on it, and it plays out. It plays out, but there is, an experience of just the things that you could think about or look to or wonder about or have in consideration so much. And so it really is like letting go of the continuous, like whatever's going on outside of my experience, wherever I'm at, whatever's being could be thought of about it is like, I'm just doing my thing. Like I'm just here hanging out, chatting. It's like there isn't any issue whatsoever going on until anyone will come up with some sort of story about it. And like the opportunity is always there. Like it's always there. This point where it's like, oh, God's going to fix me, or it's going to get me to a point. It's just like a continuous following, like a following the leader. You keep going and you'll keep going, continuing to follow that, and wondering, measuring yourself based on how well you're following it, based on how well you're even just like staying under control. If that leader is, having control, being in control, then that's going to be the measurement, is like how in control I am. If the measurement is how good of a Christian I'm being, that's where the measurement's going to be. And that's going to be the whole focus of like your life, pretty much. That's what everything will then surround, is how well or how poorly you're doing that, as opposed to not looking so much, not thinking that there's something out there that's going to give you like a settling of like, but anything could happen. It's like that's always the case, and there's nothing you're going to come across or a person that's going to like soothe that potential to look at like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how my life's going to play out. Like, that's dope. That's exciting. That's really intriguing. And the assumption that you could even know how it's playing out ever, or what's going on, but you can certainly try and figure it out and like fucking sit there and think about how it's playing out or how it could be, and just like spin around that for a while. Just hop on the merry-go-round of like, here's all the ways that you could think about how things are happening or playing out. But I also see, and I'll do these things, but I like the tangents and whatnot. But I do see we have more comments, and I do
We
want to
do. There is a
see what
follow up
these
from Jack, and I
are.
want to finish this conversation with him quickly.
Yes.
Um, and this is, I'm going to end it here because, again, I think the problem isn't necessarily anything that I'm saying. I think the problem is cognitive dissonance on the part of the person in the comment section. And it's because you have something at stake here. You have something you have to stand up for, and you have something that you stand on for a sense of false certainty, for a sense that you are on the right path, for a sense of how much value you have. That is the entire payoff to what you're doing. And so I will say, on its face, you have no faith. You have no faith, and you are no closer to God than any other believer in fiction. Period. Period. Okay. And here's the comment that will close this, and it's your comment. And if you can't hear what I'm saying in terms of self validation in this comment alone, there is nothing I have to say to you, because it's all on your willingness to be self honest. Here it is. That last point is false. The Bible teaches us to do all of those things: be present, connect, be empathetic, blah, 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 blah. And all the things I said earlier. Those accents you just described are those who particularly don't understand the Bible. I think you're confusing people who claim to be Christian with actual Christians. I'm not even going to comment further on that. If you can't hear the self-soothing, self-validation need to feel above others, the reason that you hold on to this, if you can't hear that shit yourself, it's on you, man. And I mean that. Like, and you can argue all day, but the difference is that you're the one who's praying to a fiction that doesn't answer you. You're the one who's praying for an experience you can't touch. I'm the one experiencing it. So we can argue all day, but I have nothing to argue. You just got a lot of work to do. And I get it, so do I, but I'm doing it. And you're clinging to a story. And that's okay. You're welcome to do that as long as you like, but nobody here believes that you're doing anything but. That said, there was a question way up, so I'm going to go back there quickly. Knowing what you know now, would you approach reading the Bible? How would you approach reading the Bible for the first time? I would say that it helps to remember a few things. The Bible is written first and foremost by you. It's written by your awareness. It's written by reality itself. But as such, it falls within the spectrum of whether or not we knew that when we were writing it. And so some parts of the Bible, the people who are speaking knew that. And other parts, and then in other parts of the Bible, the people who are speaking are talking about the people who knew that and didn't know it themselves. That's why I always find it funny that the New Testament is filled with people who misunderstood Jesus. So I would say that go into it just recognizing it, that just because it's a book that has the title "The Bible" doesn't mean that it's any more true than any other book. Like, you still have to put it on you to read through and see where people are self-validating, where people are just trying to feel better than others, where people are just trying to feel in control, and that means you have to be honest about your own need to do that. So if I was going to say, how would you read the Bible? In the same way that you approach your own shit, with a great deal of skepticism.
Yeah, and like, yeah, just a willingness to even there, like, not wonder about how to do it, like the right way to go about it, or that anyone's perspective of anything. It's like you can go into everything kind of with that hesitancy, that grain of salt. And so certainly something that you read from over time, but I guess there's that underlying like need to feel like there is like an absolute truth. It's like, no, this is the answer. And I'm just going to assume that and then read everything through that because I want there to be something, I want there to be something that's going to give that fucking sense of, am I doing the right thing? Oh, it's just something to follow. Oh, it's just these steps. Oh, it's just, just got to live that way and then I'll be good. And like, fucking, you can do that for your whole goddamn life and getting in to any sort of religion is diving into just another way of feeling feeling good, feeling better about yourself, having that perspective that you're doing the right thing or do something well. And you don't really get that. But like we were talking about before, that trait of being involved in your experience and like actually being in it. It's like what is the benefit you want from that? It's like the reason the benefits felt good was because like most of the time you felt like a bag of shit a lot of times. It's like there was a reason for the good feelings, like any sort of thing that you looked forward to. Like heaven, especially, which is a big one that's like an ultimate clinger, for a lot of Christians, is like this prolonged sort of sense of, well, I'm at least doing the right thing here. And that's gotten more and more like muddled, I feel like over time, at least my life, but a lot of Christians will still hold on to that. Like, well, it's like this absolute sort of thing. And I haven't experienced as much with that extreme side of it. So I don't, I don't think about it like that so much, but that's the ultimate. Like, I mean, the thought of hell, I forget how much like it's that thought of hell. It's kind of just like scares people into believing. And it's just like such clear fear manipulation. And then like having an answer in response to a problem. It's like the classic, media thing, like create a problem that we have the solution for and then give the solution or give instill a fear, create a problem. Yeah. Give a solution and answer. And then that's what you, keep doing. Keep people rolling and keep people going. But yeah, it's always gonna, yeah.
Well, it comes back to what we were saying earlier. Like, there's a developmental process that happens in human beings, and most of us don't know that. We don't look at that. We aren't aware of that because, of course, it's not in any way looked at in the schooling system for the most part. But if anybody's curious, check out Jane Levenger, Steps of Ego Development. It came out in the 50s. It's not hard to find. There's all kinds of articles on it. The point is that throughout that development of our ego, of our identity, the idea of ourselves, we become increasingly willing to question the idea of ourselves. That is the mark of an adult. Right? An adult is somebody who no longer relies on the idea of themselves and the ideas that validate that idea of themselves in order to interact with the world, which is why they're able to empathize, they're able to collaborate, they're able to cooperate, they're able to actually make decisions with a rational mind because they're not lost in their drama. So we know as we develop that we question concepts in order to see the nuance of the reality behind the concept. Okay. In the same way that a tree is not the idea you have of a tree. A tree is not the word tree, right? A tree is far more involved, right? It's not just wood and leaves either. There's a whole thing there where it's like fighting gravity all the time and it's breaking the laws of physics and it's doing all kinds of shit. Like there's a lot happening in a tree. But you need to be willing to actually question that. And most people don't want to because then all of a sudden they're like, is that tree looking at me? And it's just a different way of looking at the world. It makes them very uncomfortable. But that's, again, the mark of becoming an adult. Being willing to question your concepts that made you comfortable enough to go through the world as you grew up and continue to push your boundaries. Because that's what the self image was for. That's what our self concept was. It was a way of feeling safe so we could know how to interact with those around us. But then our group keeps widening, which requires us to let more of those conceptual divisions go. Otherwise, we end up in conflict with half the group who don't think like we do. This is why it's the stages of ego development. Ego development being eventually letting that fucker go as truth entirely. Okay, so now knowing that growing up means understanding that the concept is not the reality. This goes back to the question that I always come across, and I came across on Instagram today with the Christian argument. Well, do you not believe in absolute truth? And my response was, I think you're confusing conceptual truth for truth. Because that is exactly what they want. They want the truth. There's a God, Jesus is his son. These are the things I'm not supposed to do wrong. These are the rules, and this is where I'm going if I do it wrong. Yeah, that's the truth. And doesn't it sound superficial and conceptual? And there's so many fucking holes, and like there's just none of it actually makes any sense, or none of it survives any scrutiny because it's all fiction, right? And it's all just self-soothing fiction at the end of the day. But you don't know that if you're a fucking toddler. You don't know that if you're a preteen. You don't know that if you're still in a state of mind where you need to focus on ideas that validate you and make you feel safe and secure, and more importantly, welcome in a peer group. These are all childish needs. These are all things that we grow out of as we become adults. And becoming full grown does not equate to becoming an adult. And that's the whole point about development. Egotistically, ego development, it doesn't have to keep going. We can just fucking stop. There are plenty of underdeveloped egos out there. And us as a society, we linger around stage 3 or 4. And I just want to mention to everybody, there's 10. There's 10 stages of ego development in Levenger's model. And we are quite clearly around stage 3 and 4. Stage 3 and 4 being where religion lies. Because it's easy, it's conceptual, it's self-validating. That's the point. But what is absolute truth? See, I like this because people say, well, so there's no truth? No, there is. The truth is what is. The truth is now. This existence. That's not your perception of it, though it includes all perceptions of it. But that's the truth. What is? Which means that for you to actually know the truth is for you to be the truth, is for you to be in the process of being that truth unfolding. It's not a conceptual truth any more than knowing yourself is conceptual. Knowing yourself is a process. Knowing yourself is something that's ongoing. It's not knowing as if now I know it. It's knowing as in getting to know someone. Knowing yourself is not something that ever ends. Your life is the process of knowing yourself. And so, if you want truth, you have to be willing to let go of your lies. You have to be willing to let go of your fictions. You have to be willing to question the concept. You have to be willing to kill the Buddha in the road.
Yeah, and I can feel like those senses of building identity, like building those ideas of the community to be in, the how you think about yourself, and like the thoughts of what that meant, and how much, like, I forget how much that was like growing up, sort of a consideration, was like, well, where do you fit? Where do you fit? As if there's, a certain spot. And again, it's all just like humans interacting, making up stories in our head about what's going on, about what things mean. Because it's like there is the reality of like people, things. There's the reality of, you know, interactions, but like beyond that, it's kind of it. Like all the stuff about what it means to be a certain type of person, or right way, or right way to spend your time, who to interact with, when to interact with them. Like all that stuff is on top of just like, it is what it is. Like you are what you are, interacting right now, not sure where it's going to go. Like there starts to be, you get a clearer picture. At least I've gotten a clearer picture of where, anything beyond that is expectation. Like, oh, but you should be doing this, and it can go for yourself, it can go for someone else. Oh, this should be happening this way, based on no guarantees whatsoever. Usually we'll use the past to say like, well, this should be happening because look, it's always happened. It's like, that doesn't mean that right now, because how does anything change? How does anything change if it's continued? But this, because that, it's like, where does that shift happen? Like, change can't happen as long as we keep looking at the past, as long as we keep considering like where things have been, where things have been going, even like the, current state of the world. Like, it's changing right now. Like, it is change. It's changing right now. So as soon as we have any idea of how we're doing, how things are going, what's happened, how they should happen, it's like it's all fucked up. Like we're probably a bunch of steps behind. We have no idea what's happening right now. Like, how even saying it, dude, like society is this. It's like that's an insane thing to like blanket, like it just so quick, like wrap it up. It's like, this is what society is right now. It's like, whoa, according to who or what, there can be like overarching behavioral patterns to recognize, the stage of development that we're at and whatnot. But in terms of an overarching idea that can then indicate the right thing to do next, the wrong thing to do, like to assume that like an individual could even come to that conclusion conceptually, as opposed to just via letting go of that being a thing and looking around and being honest. Like anything else is like such a limited perspective, and with nothing to draw from with actual context, unless you're not assuming that it's right. It's just, this is what's happening, this is what's playing out. But yeah, as long as we look, as long as you look to the past for things, for the right way to be or act or just do that, it's like that's not being informed to the same degree. It's kind of just keeping everything the same. Maintenance. Maintenance. And I think we've been just trying to maintain for a while, for a long time. And then again, it's like, I don't know how long. I don't know shit. It's like, are you doing it right now?
That's the only thing that really matters. Right, because that's the thing. When we look back, we're like, we've been maintaining a long time. Yeah, I mean, observably, I mean, you can look at the majority and go, yeah, but it doesn't mean that there weren't people, underneath there, going in the opposite direction. There had to be. Even the story of Jesus is one of those fucking people. That's the thing. Like, I like the story. I like the story. I don't need to have a superhero to protect me from the universe because I'm not that afraid. But the story is cool. It really is. But that said, we've got a few more questions. I know we got one here specifically. If anybody has any more questions you'd like us to address in this episode, please do so because we're going to wrap up here in the near future. This one's good. Do you believe in supernatural beings living in other dimensions? I want to preface this by saying if they're living in other dimensions, it is entirely possible that it's natural there. I don't know if they would still be considered supernatural, being that it's another dimension. It may have totally different rules of physics. Like there might be something entirely different about it. So, no. The answer is no. I don't believe. Do I admit that all things that can exist do exist and will exist at some point in eternity? Yeah, absolutely. So, whether you call those other dimensions, other timelines, whatever you want to call it, yeah, they exist by virtue of the fact that they must. I'm not going to go any further into that because then people are going to start talking about astral projection. Can we get there? Blah, 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 which comes back to the point that Andrew was just making. Who gives a shit? Like, is that really the important part? And I'm not sure you're going to ask that question, but I just want to, caveat and just say, I don't fucking care.
Yeah, and you've responded to things like that in the past before, and I've always kind of wondered about it. It's like, well, if it can, then it must, and that's just kind of like it. Because again, like you can just dive into that and be like, but maybe this and maybe, and at the end of the day, it's still a story, that you can sit and think about and look at, but it's yeah, it's like it's not here, it's not this, so it's like one way or the other. It's like yeah, in eternity, like every variation of everything all the time, like, yeah, any other perceived dimension. And then, yeah, well, that makes me start wondering about like, you know, alternative dimensions and like even the idea of it is only going to be an idea until it's like, and as soon as it's not an idea, it's reality. So it's like it's like it's fun to wonder about, sure, but that's, I guess, even anything outside of what's going on right now. I can make some sort of story about what's going on, about, and it can feel like, another place on Earth. You can think about that right now. It can be like another dimension that you're just like thinking about. Other things are going on right there. And it's like, I can't even guarantee that necessarily. I can't actually guarantee much outside of like just what I'm doing right now, like for any variation of anything. So it's like, yeah, kind of like, yeah, it's what it is. And yeah, that's it.
This is why I like the original practice of like the Gnostics. Let's just say, like, I'm not advocating for Gnosticism before somebody fucking says that. What I did like though was the fact that they didn't have a head. Like there was nobody who was the leader of the Gnostics. Like that didn't exist, right? It was just pockets of people who would get together and talk about self-awareness because Gnostic comes from gnosis, which means self-knowledge. That's what it means, right? And so that was the practice. That's what they were talking about. Self-knowledge, self-awareness. That was the whole fucking thing, right? And so I find it just fascinating to go back to that. I'm not sure why I went on that tangent, but I did. Oh, because we have a question regarding organized religion. So the problem that I have with organized religion is the fact that it becomes a religion, right? It becomes, instead of everybody just talking about their existence, about their journey to self-awareness, through self-awareness, as self-awareness, however you'd like to describe it, right? Because in that, it's like synapses coming together and suddenly firing. That's a conversation because it's a conversation grounded in reality, grounding in the questioning of assumptions about existence. So that way you can come closer and closer and closer to that nuanced reality that's beyond the concept. Okay. And so somebody was saying here, one reason for organized religion is community and socialization in real life. That is definitely an argument that religion makes, but you'll notice that it's always limited to people who agree with you. Right. And so I like the next part. It's a place to meet new people. Sadly, that's why a lot of people go to church and continue on the facade that they believe, because otherwise they wouldn't know who to interact with. We need more places outside of the church for people of all ages to routinely come together. Yeah. Yeah, we do. We do, but we need to be able to do this with almost, the mentality that the church claims to have but doesn't really embody, which is to actually make it not about any one person or any one organization or any one message or any one dogma, right? It's actually just to be a place for, like the Gnostics, people to come together and talk about their journey as self-awareness. And so while we don't have the resources to make these places available as yet, we do actually host groups 5 days a week on Zoom, because that is the best that we can do, is create a virtual space wherein people can come together and talk about self-awareness, face the challenges of self-awareness, empathize, and actually resonate with people going through the same shit who feel just as alone as you do. And there is nothing to believe. There is nothing to follow. There is no dogma to hold on to. There's no religion. There's no church. There's nothing you can label yourself, because I'm going to call you out on that shit if you ever do. It's like, I'm part of the dualistic unity. No, you're still on your own. It's your relationship with reality, and we know it. We know it. And so this is something that we are growing right now. We've been at this for 2.5 years. And ultimately, we're going to continue to do this. We do in-person retreats. We've done 10 so far. We've got one coming up at the end of May in Colorado, where people can come together. Exactly like you said. It's not a church, because who wants that? But it is a dope house where we all get to hang out, talk to one another, have any degree of conversation, whether it be deep and philosophical or just fun while we're playing pool, but it's a chance to actually share existence together, to share this moment that is real, rather than any bullshit description of that moment that makes us feel better as people, right? It's a place to be uncertain and to know that that's okay. So the retreats are the best that we can do for that right now. We're trying to organize other events as well. We'd like to do a music festival. We'd like to do a comedy night, that kind of thing. But right now we're in the middle of expanding, which actually is a good opportunity to mention that we're looking for investors. If you would like to invest in Dualistic Unity, like I said, we have been here for 2.5 years. We are in the top 1.5% of podcasts globally. We're not going anywhere, but we are going to expand fairly quickly and in a big way. And so if you would like to join that, please do by clicking on the QR code there, or going to dualisticunity.com/invest. Doesn't mean you have to invest, but at least you can look at the presentation, and then you can, give us some feedback. You can find out what we're up to, where this is going, where this might potentially go, and some of the shit that we've already looked at in terms of not having a ceiling. Because again, this is an act of faith. Dualistic unity is an act of faith. Showing up here and talking to you is an act of faith. Showing up here and being myself is an act of faith. All of this is just me and Andrew and everybody here in the audience and everybody listening, and you yourself putting yourself out there, being willing to question things that made you comfortable, because that's exactly what I'm going to do here. That's exactly what Andrew's going to do. It's exactly what we're doing. And so just showing up is making an impact. Just showing up is an act of faith. And I very much appreciate it. But on that note, we should probably wrap up here. I don't see any more giant questions. And so for the time being, we shall put the Bible argument away. If you would like to join us for tomorrow's call-in show, you can, every second Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time here on Twitch.
Oh yeah, call-in show tomorrow. This has been fun. I'm enjoying the religion conversations quite a bit, because I have way less experience, like just having, like, even like in person, like interaction, like live interactions, thinking about like what's there, and wondering about religion, because I've been through religion. I grew up Catholic, like sort of. It was like a half-ass Catholic. Did go to a Catholic school hardcore for 5 years, so got a good interest there. And that was at a point I remember, like really wanting to go to that school too. That was at a point where I thought, I was big into golf, and I was like, I'm gonna be the first golfer ever to say a prayer on the rosary during 18 holes of golf. Imagine, dude. Imagine. Like that. There's like some trajectory where that happens. Like I had to make a choice basically between golf and baseball when I was younger. Chose baseball, but like I was pretty good at golf, and I was like I was like crazy passionate about it when I was like 11, 12 years old. And I was also like super into being a good follower of the fucking church. Like I wasn't like big into everything about it, but like, yeah, I was big into doing the right thing. And so, yeah, it's funny. I forgot that. I had that thought. I can remember so clearly thinking like, I'm gonna make the tour and bring the rosary, bring Jesus with me. I forget that I was like into that for a bit, like with the religion. I kind of only think about it like towards my later teenage years, but that's funny. That's funny. But it's always fun to dive into more so like where it comes from, like why people believe religion instead of for a lot of it for me. Cause now I'm like recognizing more ways that I do that. Cause like religion's just a variation of looking to someone else for a right way, right thing to do. And so we do that in all different sorts of ways. You know, looking at religion is a way that you can do it, but seeing where it comes from in yourself, you can see where it comes from in someone else. And so it's not so, at least less so now for me, about just being like, oh, religion's ridiculous, you know, blah, 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 which I'm not saying that it's not, but it's like why someone would want to believe that, because it's like it satisfies that state of like, what the fuck is am I, is this is the right thing to do? Give me some direction, just wanting some direction, as opposed to like taking the step yourself and be like, I'm going to take this step right now. But why? Because I'm taking the step. No reason, no reason to do it. No need to validate or confirm anything to anyone else. And it's just like for no reason whatsoever besides it's the one that I'm doing right now. So this has been fun as always. And
It has been fun. It has been fun. I
yeah,
just wanted to close on this, that I think it helps to remember that, you know, faith in the reality of yourself is faith in the reality of God. But faith in the concept of God is not faith in the reality of yourself or God. It's just an idea that makes you feel better, and it stops you from actually experiencing it. Now, there is one comment here. I'm going to address it very quickly, and it's just because, I can, and it's on its face just kind of funny. Um, can you provide any proof for your claims that the Bible is false, and also that your ideology is correct? And what's funny is this is all prefaced on the argument that the Bible's true. You have to prove that it's not. No, I don't. I don't. Any more than I would expect you to prove to me that Santa doesn't exist. I mean, that's just one of those things I don't need to get into. And the reason is because I'm here in reality. See, again, like you're arguing over things because you need to. You've spent all of this time and attention in the comments section desperately, desperately trying to get some self validation. Please, please allow me to argue this because I've got to feel like I'm fucking right. And that's the fruit of the tree you're invested in. You need people to agree with you. You need people to see your point of view, because again, you aren't standing on your own. And without that validation, you're just left with uncertainty and doubt. And you can argue a straw man argument, blah, blah, blah. You can do all that all you like. But tonight, you're going to be left with your doubt. You're going to be left with the fucking bitter taste of how badly this conversation went and how little validation you got from it. And I'm not. So I appreciate you being here. Feel free to come in for the call-in show tomorrow.
for sure. Look forward to that conversation, seeing where it goes. But yeah, that's what we can wrap with right there. Appreciate everyone for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon.